All right, we are live here, and I am here with my guest today. So, before I introduce the guest, welcome to the second Mumbai Charcha. Our viewers would know that the first Mumbai Charcha happened with Sanjay Ubaleji, and it was a really interesting conversation from a person standing between Samaj Sarkar and Bazaar. Mumbai Charcha is an initiative of Blue Ribbon Movement and Mumbai First, two organizations who really care about the city and have come together in this run up to the elections. Blue Ribbon Movement builds leadership for a better world through civic action. It's a whole ecosystem of several initiatives that young people are doing, several innovations, several experiments, all towards leadership and a better city. Mumbai First is an advocacy initiative. It's striving to make the city a better place to live, work, and invest in. And it does this through partnerships with the government, business, and civil society. So that's Mumbai First, and that is BRM. And our guest today is somebody who who I love a lot. I think that's what's coming to me. A lot of love and respect. Hello, Rajni. Welcome. Rajni Bakshi is
Thank you to
here.
all. Yeah, you
Welcome,
Abhishek,
Rajni.
Mumbai First, and BRM for inviting me. It's a big honor.
Yes, thank you, Rajni. And Rajni, there's so many ways to introduce you. I think I would introduce you as somebody who, over last several decades, has been documenting, analyzing, and reflecting deeply on what's happening in the society. I think your journey began in the 70s as a young journalist, and from then on, various publications, a lot of scholarship, books like Bapu Kuti and others on economics.
Bazaars, conversations,
Bazaar's
and freedom
conversation.
for a market culture beyond greed and fear.
Yes. So a wide-ranging set of conversations, and now the host of Ahimsa Conversations, 100-episode series on nonviolence. Phenomenal.
101 as of last Friday,
Kya baat hai,
and
phenomenal.
tomorrow 102.
Wow. And an amazing storyteller, raconteur, a person you would choose to spend an evening with any day to lift your spirits, a Sada Jawan soul. Welcome, Rajni. Thank you for
Thank
accepting
you,
this
thank you,
invitation.
thank you. You spoil me. But thank you all for giving me this honor of being part of this very important initiative.
So, Rajni, our typical first question is around your relationship with the city and its spirit. Each of us is a Mumbaikar, each of us has a story about how we relate to this city and how do we see the spirit of this city. What
Yeah.
is the spirit of Mumbai, and what's your story? What's your relationship with the city and its spirit?
So it's a very, my story about Bombay. I mean, my connection to Bombay is very much the story of free India. My parents moved here in 1949 because my father got a job in the Reserve Bank of India. And the most vivid memory I have of his recall of those days was that when he first came to see, he was from Lahore, right? We were a partition affected family, and he came only for the interview. That's the first time he saw Bombay. And the first thing anybody said to him was, "Yahan naukri mil jayegi, chokri mil jayegi, par holi nahi milegi." So
Even
in
in
that
those
sense,
days, you
yeah.
think housing was a challenge.
Yeah. So this is an important memory to recall because of, how much has changed since then. And I want to say this up front here that in that kind of growth, there is something to be said for it. And then basically, though I was not born in Bombay, and with a few gaps of about 8-9 years total, I've lived here, now, I mean, I've lived here from 1980. And I think there's a sense of being home. That's all I can say. Even ab to khair hum sab spoiled ho gaye, we are flying around and all that like maniacs, but not till 10 years ago I used to only take the train, and the moment the train crossed Itarsi on this side and maybe the Hanu on the western side, I thought, chalo shukar hai, ghar aa gaye.
अच्छा, इतारसी से you started feeling घर आने लगा.
I felt, yes, especially if you were coming from Bihar, Bhagalpur, you definitely felt that.
Love.
So there's a sense of home, and Anyway, but there's a lot of negatives, of course, in the, when I look back and compare my parents' memories with what we have now, they tell vivid stories about having machines. There were like truck-like machines that used to clean the streets with water. Of course, there were much fewer streets to clean, but still. And so I think there's a wonderful feeling of relaxed belonging.
Wow, relaxed belonging. I love that word, relaxed belonging.
Yeah.
Could you share more about that relaxed belonging?
Well, see, because I have lived in Delhi also, and this is not a Delhi versus Bombay thing. I don't want to go down that track. So I'm only sharing a personal memory to anybody who's going to get offended. I want to make that disclaimer. But something about the vibrational field, for me personally, is there's some underlying tension. Maybe it's completely to do with me. It may not be a pervasive or let's say an objective reality. But so for example, I would never take a taxi alone at midnight in Delhi.
Right.
Even today. Whereas I wouldn't think even for half a second before doing it in Bombay. Now, this may or may not have any, I don't know what the statistics on this are. And it's probably just a impression. It may have no logical or rational basis, but there you are. Perception is reality.
Yeah.
To a large extent. And so I'm just sharing, you asked for a detail on, and of course, now things have changed, but there was a time when Bombay was perhaps, and maybe Calcutta, I've never lived in Calcutta, but I hear that it had a similar and yet in many ways differently rich culture. Say 30 years ago, in most other cities, it was very awkward for a woman to walk into a liquor store and buy liquor. Immediately, there would be all kinds of looks. In Bombay, it was never an issue. My mother used to always say, "Arey, hum Delhi jaate hain, to 4 बार सोचना पड़ता है कि ये सलवार ठीक है कि नहीं, ये कमीज ठीक है कि नहीं, ये दुपट्टा फैशनेबल है कि नहीं," because there was always this feeling of being judged. Maybe this was a family thing, I don't know. But in Bombay, there's a sense of whatever you wear, it goes.
Definitely a lot of freedom and
partly because people are so busy, who has time to look at the other person and judge their clothing. This may have changed now. I don't know. Honestly, I'm a dinosaur. What do I know? What is happening to people who are now 20? So, I mean, in a sense, what I'm saying may be history. I don't know that for sure.
I think the spirit goes fairly deep, and the energy reverberates across several decades. So I would definitely say that. And I want to sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. Because this kind of, it's a feature that got left out. I think for many of us in my generation, what was very precious about Bombay was the co-mingling of classes.
Co-mingling of economic
classes. Yes. See, right here, I live in Prabhadevi. Within, I would say, 50 meters or even 20 meters of, say, my gate is the center point. In a 20 meters radius, you will find people of, well, not all classes. No, actually we do. We have some pavement dwellers also. Yeah, so pavement dwellers would be, in that sense, at the bottom of the hierarchy. So you have from Nasli Wadia, literally, who lives down the road, to the pavement dweller. Okay, maybe a radius of 50 meters.
Okay.
So there is a fancy gym just a little further down the road, but there's also an open air little place where the working class children meet for exercises and karate and judo, and they meet in the evenings under these halogen lamps in the open air. So I am very nervous, in fact, of the whole area getting, what shall I say, in some way altered and become more of a monoculture, because that is what happened to Parel. It will eventually, the plan seems to be to do it to the whole of Parel. No? With the, yeah, but so I know many foreigners come and write reams and reams about how, oh, look down from the fancy flat and you can see a slum. But, and I'm not at all saying that anybody, I mean, it's tragic that anybody should have to live in a slum. But as long as somebody is living in a slum, it's much better that you know this and you see it every day, rather than, you know, the rich retreating into a complete cocoon and having not even a visual contact with how the rest of the 99% lives. Or rather, in India now we know, let's not limit it to 99, but how the rest of the 90% lives. Right? You know this, the recent report that if you have a monthly income of 25,000, that's it, just 25,000, you're in the top 10%. So aap soch lo, what does it mean then for the bottom 90?
True, true.
We also have cows, huh? That's why I love my Prabha Devi. हमारे यहाँ गाय भी मिल जाती हैं.
बढ़िया.
They walk up and down. The गौशाला भी है. So it's very lovely. And we are still a small town atmosphere with family-owned shops, people who know each other by name, who ask for my brother who has migrated 30 years ago. They are still asking, kaisa hai? There is no way that you can, you know, ascribe a value to this. You can only feel it.
Yes, it's intangible.
Yeah.
I think that's also kind of the essence of Mumbai, right? The coexistence of it. Because I remember on Nariman Point, a typical Saturday night, if you take a walk across Marine Drive from NCP all the way to Churchgate, you really see like a microcosm of India, like different religions, different classes. It's like this should be a Republic Day parade, right? Because you're just seeing the color and the diversity of the country in just like a 500-meter or a 1 kilometer stretch, all sitting and enjoying the sea. It's such a heartwarming moment.
You know, this is so wonderful that you have said this, because in your email you asked what I would call the essence of being a Mumbaiker, and the term that came to my mind was relaxed co-mingling.
Relaxed co-mingling, natural, sahaj co-mingling.
Natural, sahaj.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we've had our difficult times and we are having them now too. We'll get to that later. But that is the essence. And it, by and large, has, I want to believe, is still holding true.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of
data. Holds a promise for a larger group that this is possible. It is possible. The diversity, we can hold that diversity, we can coexist, right? Like the relaxed is a possibility.
I think that is a lived reality, not a possibility across India in many ways. True. I'm not for a moment suggesting that, you know, Bombay is unique in that. But maybe because of the intensity of the concentration of population, rather the intensity and density.
Yeah.
The whole experience gets more highlighted. It's more acute. Purani Delhi was like this too. Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai, everybody literally living, you know, cheek by jowl.
Yes.
And in fact, there it is even, there's a whole optics to it, because some of the most venerated and architecturally important structures of all the different faiths are within, like, you know, half a kilometer of each other.
True. Yeah. So you're right. This is not uniquely Mumbai. At the same time, I think because of the lack of physical space, I feel something unique that has happened is this whole privacy thing. Like I remember at Ramashray, I'm sitting and having food. Across that tiny table, there are two people who I do not know at all, and we're having food in that vicinity. Sometimes a small conversation happens and then we go our ways. utni si jagah mein, it's like you're able to hold two worlds and they come,
Yeah.
interact and move on, right? That
Yeah.
gives that flavor, I think.
Yeah. I think we should also maybe take note here that some of the, I'm no expert on this, so please bear with me. I'm not saying this in any academic or scholarly sense, just at an experiential level, that this is the land of Phule. It is the society that has been deeply touched by many waves of reform movements, not just in and by the so-called lower caste, but even within the so-called upper castes. And so it's very ironic that what Maharashtra is known for today is the opposite. But these are very important influences. They are in the air we breathe. We don't realize them.
The influences of all that has happened. And that will let me also segue to the next question, which can become like a podcast series with someone like you. But I'm going to request you to bring it to, I don't know, what will you choose from that? But I'm going to kind of combine a couple of threads, right? One is non-violence, because that's an area that is so close to your heart. You've been an inspiration for me and for Blue Ribbon and for so many others when it comes to non-violence. The history of the city has also had its ebbs and flows, and it has had its own journey as well. Uh, and then this is a capitalist hub. This is kind of the financial capital of the country, which we pride in. So there's so many of these threads that I want to combine to ask you that when you look at it, look at from your lens of history, your lens of non-violence, your lens of local economies, and from all these lenses, from the Rajni Bakshi lens, when you see the city,
Okay.
what all stands out for you? What are things that stand out when you take a sweeping gaze at the city?
So, I mean, currently, of course, this violence, non-violence issue is maybe the most predominant one, right, on everybody's mind, whether you are aware of naming it thus or not. So, for my generation, see, I'm born in the late 50s. So, we didn't even become aware of whatever happened in the 40s and primarily partition till, say, the late 60s or 70s. You become aware of these things more as a teenager. But I have read accounts later on, much later as an adult, of the violence. Bombay was affected by violence in 47. But after that, till 1992, there was no major breakdown. Yes, there were anti-South Indian riots. There were other kinds of skirmishes. I'm not saying it was a peaceful bliss. Please, I don't want to at all imply that. And yet, at least on the Hindu-Muslim front, we had all been brought up to believe that Bombay is different. It can happen elsewhere. There can be violence, there can be riots elsewhere, but it can't happen in Bombay. So 92, 93, for those who are very young, maybe I should just narrate very briefly that immediately after the Babri Masjid was demolished on 6 December 1992, there was a spate of violence in Bombay. At that stage, maybe you could call it rioting because it was,
Yes.
both sides were enraged and there was street fighting. But it stopped I can't remember now whether it was a week or a few days, but it stopped. And then, but only visibly, the tension simmered and the reasons for it are complex. This is not the place to go into it.
Sure. Yeah.
In early 93, it erupted into full-fledged chaos. The city came to a standstill. It was so bad. And I remember that this area in Bandra, Behrampada, was burning till almost end of Jan. Episodes kept happening. Now, that in some ways was a turning point for people of my generation. One, we realized that this was now a problem that was not going to go away very easily or very soon. And yet, I'll tell you what has bolstered me over the years. So 6th December also happens to be Babasaheb Ambedkar's Punya Tithi. And because I live in Prabhadevi, I have the privilege of seeing, of being witness to the lakhs of people who come to pay homage at his Samadhi, which is the spot where he was cremated, in Shivaji Park. And that line is so orderly. It is so peaceful. And it is grave without being grim. You know, people, it's a kind of it's the most sober and moving tribute come celebration of the man who has changed our society forever. We hope forever. And so I keep telling myself that this energy too is there. Of course, not all the people in the line who stand are from Bombay, but I think the bulk are. And then, of course, many, many tens of thousands, maybe lakhs come from outside, and Shivaji Park becomes like an open camp. It's beautiful. If anybody has not ever come and been part of this, please, next 6th December, do come and, you know, see this wonderful gathering. Because it's completely organic. It is complete. Nobody organizes it. The BMC makes arrangements to their credit, very good arrangements for people to be able to participate in this comfortably. So I'm saying that this, the violence and non-violence dynamic, what I have, because you asked me, Abhishek, earlier when we spoke that, you know, what have I learned from Ahimsa conversations? That, and particularly in relation to Bombay, as I said, no, because Bombay was the location where our जिसे हिंदी में कहते हैं ना, हमारा मोह भंग हुआ. Our illusion, we woke up to the reality that what we had thought about the Hindu-Muslim stability here was an illusion. But was it? Now I ask myself. Now I can only ask myself this 30 years, 40 years later. Well, 30 years later. क्या होता है कि, you know, when a terrible trauma comes upon you as a collective, it was a trauma for the whole city, no matter which side you were on. Okay, that part is very clear. It takes you a very long time to, you know, look at it with some detachment. And looking back on it with detachment, you realize, at least this is my feeling, I'm not again making any claims here, that so many competing energies are swirling. And maybe they are doing this all the time. That we must stand firm, and we must oppose and, you know, unflinchingly stand opposed to all forms of abuse, whether it is verbal, physical, emotional, and certainly to physical violence. But at the same time, we also need to worry about the perpetrators and ask ourselves, you know, what is going to be their future. And I'll tell you how I learned this, because some years after 93, I met a psychoanalyst at a public gathering. I can't remember his name now. I know, in fact, I think he said this from a public platform. He talked about how many patients he had treated who were people who had perpetrated violence in 93.
So it impacted the perpetrators also very deeply.
Yeah.
So I think just to tie this down, Rajni, you're saying there are several energies that are swirling, and there's always the violence, non-violence dynamic that plays out, like anywhere else in the city as well. If that is what
Yeah.
I gather, and knowing that this is reality, and knowing that this is the way the world is, knowing that this is the way life is, knowing that we stand on several waves of history. I think I love that you shared 6th December. Definitely visit Chaitya Bhumi.
Yeah.
And also, I think knowing waves of histories of the city takes a while to unpack layers and layers. But I want to move, if with your permission, of course, uh, from the past and the swirling of these energies to the present, to actually going into the future and talking a little bit about the visions for the city, building on this only. And you can choose to transition the way you want. But yeah, you were
Yeah.
saying something. No, so
Yeah.
before we do that, sorry, go ahead.
Before we move to that question, Abhishek, I just want to add one small detail, which I think many of our young friends, I hope, will find meaning in this, because you've all been born much later, or at least you were too young. Some of you were children in 2008. So I showed up for the funeral of Mr. Karkare and the other three fallen policemen. I don't know how I found out where to go, but anyway, it was from Dadar, at the other end of Tilak Bridge, and like me, I found hundreds of people had come. And okay, it could have been a moment, for ugly slogan shouting. It could have been a moment for counter hate, counter violence, but it was just a moment of collective and very deeply felt mourning. So shared joys, we all know much more intimately. We think that's what unites people, and it does. But also collective mourning. And I'm sure that there was no shortage of people in that crowd with whom I would have very strong political differences. But that had nothing. What does that have to do with the fact that we were all mourning together? So I don't know if this is in any way, peculiar or particular to Bombay, but I just wanted to highlight the importance of in a sense, really appreciating and valuing these moments when we go literally, as Rumi has said, these are moments which give us access to that field, beyond the right and wrong.
These moments, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, you were opening the next.
Yeah, I'm just also wondering, in the interest of time, that if you're in the second gear, I'm gonna skip the third and move to the fourth kind of a thing and move to the visions piece for the city, because also, I mean, there is actually we could have taken a nice flow. But I think it doesn't hurt to go to the visions and then maybe come back to the present.
Sure. Because in fact, that will on.
Yeah, let me take a hop into the time machine. But before I do that, I want to share four things actually, with our viewers. The first is Ahimsa conversations. Rajni has been having conversations with legends around the world, uh, documenting ideas around nonviolence and Ahimsa through deep talks as well as snippets. So there's the larger talk and then there's the snippet. So if you want to see the snippet, you find it interesting, look at the talk. And it's a total labor of love. So Ahimsa Conversations is a YouTube channel. Please do look at it and just use it as a tool for your own reflection, perhaps, on ideas of violence and non-violence. So a big thumbs up and a big shout out to 101 Ahimsa Conversations, which are already done.
Thank you. I much appreciate your saying this. It's very precious to me.
Yes. The second shout out I will do is to Mumbai Live, because Mumbai Live is very generously streaming this to its audiences, and place where Mumbai is really happening and really alive. So just want to acknowledge Mumbai Live for being a hotspot for conversations like these, and I'm sure audiences must and will benefit from being tuned in there. Uh, Mumbai First is a great place to share your ideas, suggestions about the city, concerns, and so on. The email ID is info@mumbaifirst.org. Uh, they will consider taking up these issues on behalf of citizens and working closely with the government, with the civil society, with corporates on those. So info@mumbaifirst.org is a great place. And Blue Ribbon Movement is young people doing amazing, innovative work. So those of you who would like to donate, support, contribute, we're still fundraising resources for our coming years. It's really supporting young people to do amazing stuff for the city. Great stuff is coming out: games, Facebook Live, citizen audits, actathons where people take action, and so on. So a whole range of things are happening. So please do connect and support that as well. This is the coming together of these four streams, and hopefully it's a microcosm of the future where collaborations will create a better and better city. So us dua ke saath, with that wish, I want to zoom and take you into a time machine, Rajni, into, let's say, 2050 maybe. And what's your wish list? What's your vision for the city? If you take the dreamer's seat, the poetic seat, and just dream for the city, what would your dreams be? And also, sorry, Rajni, just want to contextualize this because Mumbai Charcha happened as a result of the upcoming MCGM elections.
Right.
And we take our dreams very seriously. Like, these are the dreams. We are committed to making as much of that happen. We're going to bring them back here to manifesto promises, to nudging our politicians. And like, we're serious about this dreaming. It's not just idle dreaming. So please dream away.
Yeah. Well, when you bring the BMC elections into it, that kind of complicates matters a bit in terms of, you gave me an invitation to dream, and I honestly doubt if the BMC has within the statutory frame, the power to move the kind of mountains that we need to move. But you know what?
So I am
dream
kar lete hain, fir MCGM bring in. Let's just first
hain.
dream free. Yeah. Let's do some free dreaming.
So my dream, I would put in two words. One is development or growth as well-being.
Growth as well-being. Development as well-being.
Development stroke growth
as well-being.
As well-being. Because, and well, quite frankly, this is often called degrowth, but I avoided that term because it upsets many people. They think that, I'm calling for universalizing poverty or something, which is not the case at all. All this means is that we don't judge the success of the annual success or well-being of the city on the basis of the city's domestic product. How much money changed hands, or how many goods were transacted. That's all that growth is about. Right? Growth only tries to monitor this, but rather that we focus on the well-being and the well-being of the last person, not just in slivers. And so my dream is that we move away from this worship of growth as an end in itself, instead focus on well-being, and that we move towards but by we, I mean India. See, because actually you cannot talk about Bombay in isolation. I mean, unless you only want to talk about how to fix potholes and how to get smooth roads and how to have more ICU beds, then yes, you can talk about just the city. But since you gave me the permission to dream, I'm thinking of the city as a part of the whole. And so there's no escape from visualizing what the whole will be. And so I would say growth has well-being and decentralization. Now, decentralization doesn't mean dormitory towns where everybody then comes zooming down the sea road to work in some one hub. And in fact, maybe COVID has, opened the way for more of this to be visualized, because not only that some work can be done online, but I'm saying that there's a great deal of promise in smaller or at least more compact settlements or communities which may be interlinked, but that they are self-reliant in the basics. Now, self-reliant is very different from self-sufficient. Self-sufficient implies that you are like an island onto yourself. हमारा कोई लेना देना नहीं है. Vashi will be an island, and Nerul will be an island, and Chembur will be an island. That's not what the city is about. That's not what the nation is about. So, decentralization in the sense where not small is beautiful in a romantic way. No, there are now going to be choices that we have to make where sometimes big may be the answer. So there is no single yardstick by which if there is a yardstick, it is this, that what form of organization gives people a greater sense of agency, that is, by agency I mean control over their own life. Okay, so that then takes us to a very, very difficult issue, and that's my biggest dream, that this current culture of endless competition will somehow evaporate, will somehow morph into a more joyous and way of life where curiosity, self-discovery, and self-knowledge are prioritized. Not के अरे तुम क्लास में टॉप 10 में आए कि नहीं आए, नहीं आए तो क्या फायदा, तुम्हारी क्यों हम फीस भर रहे हैं. This is happening to children like almost from the moment they go to nursery school. And I don't blame the parents, because they are only responding to the reality that they witness and they are part of as adults in the world. So that is really the essence of, Now here is the thing, Bombay is celebrated for being the economic hub of India because here you get a chance to compete and be get ahead and everything. But many years ago, the Dalai Lama said something very precise. He said, competition is very good, as long as you're competing with yourself to be your best. Not competing to keep the next guy down, or not competing to leave the other guy behind in the race so that you can be the first across the line. And I don't know how this can happen, except that I do see some stirrings of very acute unrest among the young. By young, I mean people who are now in their late teens and 20s. The one thing that is really, I think, nudging people to challenge and rebel is climate change. Because 100% the people now in their 20s, at least all the ones that I meet, are far smarter and more quick at connecting dots and analyzing things than we were. And they're seeing the connection. They are seeing all these connections.
Yes.
But they are struggling, because it's one thing to analyze and understand what the problem is. Okay, bhai, I have to get off this treadmill. That treadmill ka feeling many have, whether they are able to get off it or not, maybe the answer will lie. So my dream is that more and more young people will find supportive collectives.
Nice. Yeah.
Through which they can help each other to get off the treadmill.
Yes.
So they don't, end up 30 years later as chief executive of something, but the sign on their desk says the problem with the rat race is that at the end of it all, you're still a rat. Or to put it another way, look, the thing is, it's not that any of this knowledge is not around. I saw this sign, I think, in the office of some Tata executive 20 years ago. It said, running your business with an eye on the profits is like playing tennis with your eye on the scoreboard instead of the ball.
Nice.
Acha, tennis ki baat aayi, to in that same meeting where the Dalai Lama made that comment, His Holiness, another gentleman from France said that tennis actually may have originated in the villages of France, and it was exactly the opposite. The game was played among, like any other, like we play pittu or stapu or I don't know, cricket, but it was played to see how, say if you and I were playing, we played to see how long we can remain in coordination and not drop the ball.
Okay.
The joy is in that.
Joy is in,
that we are trying to match each other's energy and movements to see how long we can keep. Now, many people, when I tell them this story, they said, that's so stupid. Then there's no game, no, because there's no winner. So I don't know. I never argue.
No, but yeah, sure. But I think I hear you.
I don't argue with that.
Yeah. But you simplify this to two very simple things as I'm hearing it, Rajni. One is restore well-being, and the other I'm hearing as restore agency, where you're saying decentralization so that I have well-being and agency. And I'm just going to talk a bit about, one is, this event itself, which is a collaboration between Mumbai First, Blue Ribbon. We know in the not-for-profit sector, collaborations are like hard. And hopefully collaborations at the civil society level. We are also doing a budget analysis, bringing people in. And so collaborations rather than competing, I think at least in the Samaj side of the world, slowly we hope will start happening more and more. And also when we look at the elections, things like doing activities like Fools Forum that Blue Ribbon does to bring in communities together, or a citizen audit, or the 74th Amendment kind of work, open spaces, where people can have leisure and comfort, and the other intangibles that are not just consumption and material consumption. I feel what I'm hearing from you is balancing that Mumbai, which is like competitive, consuming, capitalist, with just the well-being centered city, and a city where
the two things
are restored.
And it's not as though the well-being framework is completely alien. And, that's what happens actually. The whole problem in much of the public narrative is that the well-being narrative is projected as a kind of, I don't know, Disney scenario. It's like an animated Disney movie. And the guys who are doing the competing and so-called wealth creation are the real guys. They are the serious people. They are living in the real world. So this false dichotomy has to be challenged and overcome. So, for example, when we talk about just now all the things that you highlighted in the context of the upcoming election, all of that is more difficult if we continue to shrink the open public spaces. We lost one opportunity when we lost the battles, both in court and outside court, to save Parel, as a public resource. That opportunity, I haven't checked on this, but I hope that opportunity is still available in the dock when we are transforming the dock area. The
dock area holds that promise, if we are able to get that.
But again, it's going to be on one side of the city. We have to find ways of restoring and creating new public spaces.
Town squares and walking districts, and when we go abroad, there's so much inspiration for what's possible.
That's right. What in English are called commons.
The commons.
जिसको हम हिंदी में कहेंगे सामूहिक स्थान या सामूहिक स्पेसेस या जगह जी है। ऐसा नहीं है कि ये तो देखो यहाँ बॉम्बे में इतने किस्म का सोशल स्ट्रोक पॉलिटिकल इनिशिएटिव है। अब यहाँ डाउन द रोड देयर इज ए लिटिल श्राइन टू ए मुस्लिम पीर. It is looked after by Shiv Sena and other activists. It's a gathering place. वो कितनी बार उसको demolish करते हैं. And it's almost like a fixed thing. The poor BMC feels it must come and demolish. It's an irregular, it's unlicensed. They come and demolish it. For 2 months, everybody waits, then they rebuild it.
Yeah.
And what
People
is it?
want to,
It's a place where people, now I must confess there's a gender issue here. In this particular case, it's men who gather, but I'm sure there are other spaces where it is men and women and children all are able to gather. So my request, or I think maybe like the wrap-up thought I would share is that there are limitations to doing this in a BMC election, as I said, because some of these are very large macro policy shifts that are needed. But at least if we know what the demand is, we can raise that voice to get the energy of more people, elected representatives in the BMC to
push for that. Definitely.
To push for that,
definitely.
to work for those changes and those shared spaces. What you said about Marine Drive, it is there because at some point, our elders, long before we were around, took a call that we will limit the pav bhaji and bhel puri stalls to a certain part of Chowpatty. We will not allow those stalls to run all the way to Nariman Point. That's why you have that space of Marine Drive.
Some visionary thinking there. And I think that's something that we...
Nahi to kya hai? That whole space, half of it could have been occupied by stalls and 1/3 of it would have been left. 1/3 or 1/4 or half would have been left for the walking.
Yes. Yeah, so I think some visionary thinking is what I'm gathering, and these addas and kattas and hangout areas and open spaces, and we'll take some of that into our manifesto also, that we're trying to build a citizen manifesto.
Bilkul. Because I really want to believe that, and this is wishful thinking, maybe I'm aware of that. I still want to believe that is where real society formation, well, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. It's not about real versus false, but that I'm hoping is still the primary location where social formation happens. Because kya hai, this whole social media thing, it's the technology is designed almost for extremes.
For exclusion, isolation. Yeah. So we need
extremes of both love and hatred.
Yeah.
That's much less likely to happen when people sit face to face.
Yes.
First of all, they have some equation. There's some history, and there are so many more nuanced conversations possible.
Yes.
So I would say that we can't underestimate the importance of those shared and community spaces, or even just commons. You may come from a different community. Somebody may have come from Andheri, I may have come from Prabhadevi. But those shared spaces
would be the single
that we can all and maybe as a last word, there's a very beautiful thing that has been said, because it's a global movement to defend the commons from the rapacious incursions of the capitalist energy. And all it is saying is that why do many of today's capitalists, not all, certainly not all, forget that commons are the pool in which the fish of private capital are able to swim. If you destroy, it's like drying up the pool and then expecting the fish of private capital to survive. How can that happen?
Bilkul. So I think you've nailed it with that one, that let's nourish the commons, let's reclaim the face-to-face. Let's create, I think last time Sanjay spoke about the dharma of Mumbai is to create wealth. And I think in this conversation, we've expanded the definition of wealth to include social capital, to include cultural capital, and really building all of that through.
If I may clarify, I'm not just including, I'm giving it primacy.
Okay. So that comes first.
Yeah, social and ecological capital, because at the end of the day, the claim that Bombay is a wealth generator is a postal address matter.
Sure, but Rajni, okay. So let's complete that in just 1 or 2 sentences, because we're also way ahead of time.
No, just that after all, whatever it is that, if you are Tata Sons, what is making you a multi-billion-dollar company is not happening in Bombay. All the material creation is happening somewhere else, even if you're TCS, which is more virtual compared to Tata Steel. So this Bombay generates wealth is only because it is a hub of the postal addresses of the where the companies are registered. The wealth is being generated elsewhere in India.
Sure. The point taken, but parked for a longer podcast, because this is
of course.
larger conversation.
I don't want to overstay my welcome.
Yes. So, and though I think just honoring what you said in terms of primacy to ecological, social, cultural capital, and like you said, it's the pool in which the fish flow. So I think on that note, also as citizens, for us really seeing that long-term visionariness that created the Marine Drive, I think we don't need to think in 5-year terms or 1-year terms. We can dream of a longer vision and then nudge our governments towards that. So with that dua, with that intention, I want to just thank you, Rajni. I want to thank Mumbai Live,
thank you all,
Mumbai First, and
I'm so
DRM
sorry
to bring this all together. Thanks a lot, Rajni.
Thank you so much.